Two brothers, Zeta 40 and Zeta 42, the leaders of the Zetas cartel, now known as Cartel del Noreste, are now in U.S. custody after being extradited. Tonight, Ariami Virgen shares how the brothers were found in Mexico and why their extradition is a message to all foreign drug traffickers. According to Javier Peña, the DEA agent whose life is depicted in the Netflix series Narcos.
72 people, shot in the back of the head, one by one, piled up like garbage in a ranch outside San Fernando, Mexico. Men and women who had crossed half a continent trying to reach the American dream, murdered because they refused to become killers themselves. This was not a battle. This was not a war. This was the Los Zetas' way of doing business. But here is what makes this story unlike anything else you have ever heard. The men who ordered that massacre, the men who pulled those triggers, were not gangsters who grew up on street corners. They were not born criminals. They were soldiers, elite soldiers, trained by the United States Army at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, trained to fight drug cartels. And then, one by one, they became the cartel. To understand Los Zetas, you first need to understand who they were before they became monsters. 1994. Mexico is in crisis. The Zapatista uprising has just erupted in Chiapas. The government is terrified of insurgency spreading. In response, Mexico creates one of the most elite military units in its history, the Grupo Aeromoval de Fuerzas Especiales, the GAFE. Mexico's version of the Green Berets. The specific skills learned by the Zetas, one expert later told Al Jazeera, primed them for careers as contract killers and drug dealers. They were given the tools to destroy criminal organizations. Instead, they built one. Among the GAFE's brightest officers is a young lieutenant from Puebla, Arturo Guzman de Sena. Born January 13, 1976, in a poor rural village, Guzman de Sena had joined the military as a teenager to escape poverty. He was brilliant, aggressive, and deeply ambitious. His talent earned him a place in the GAFE. His ambition would betray everything he had been trained to stand for. By 1997, the Gulf Cartel is the dominant drug trafficking empire in northeast Mexico, controlling one of the most important cocaine corridors in the world. Its new boss, Ocio Cardenas Gillen, has just seized power through violence and betrayal. He is now fighting on two fronts, rival cartels attacking his territory and the Mexican army breathing down his neck. He needs protection, not bodyguards, not street thugs, warriors. He reaches out to Guzman de Sena. The conversation between them was later captured by an informant and released by federal agents. Cardenas Gillen said, "I want the best men." "The best," Guzman de Sena replied, "these are only in the army." That was all that needed to be said. Guzman de Sena begins recruiting, not from street corners or prisons, from military bases. He approaches GAFE comrades, men he has trained and fought alongside, and offers them something the Mexican government never could: money, real money. The government paid soldiers poverty wages. Cardenas Gillen was offering salaries 10, 20, 50 times higher. Over several months, Guzman de Sena convinces 34 GAFE operators to desert. They bring with them the Mexican Army's most sophisticated weaponry: assault rifles, machine guns, bazookas, grenades, surveillance equipment, military-grade communications gear. They bring maps, tactics, training, discipline. Each member is given a code name starting with the letter Z, the radio code for high-ranking military commanders in Mexico. Guzman de Sena becomes Z1. His deputy, Heriberto Lascano, becomes Z3. The group becomes known as Los Zetas, the ZS. Mexico had spent years and American money training the perfect counter-narcotics force, one former DEA official later said. And in 1997, that force switched sides. The Gulf Cartel had always had muscle. But with the Zetas, it had something no cartel had ever possessed before: a professional army. From the moment the GAFE deserters go to work for Cardenas Gillen, everything changes. The Gulf Cartel's rivals quickly realize they are not fighting ordinary criminals anymore. These men move with military precision. They conduct ambushes the way they were trained to, cutting off escape routes, overwhelming firepower, no survivors. They plant informants in police departments and military units. They intercept radio communications. They don't just kill their enemies, they destroy them. The Sinaloa Cartel, Mexico's dominant trafficking organization, tries to muscle into Nuevo Laredo, the Gulf Cartel's crown jewel. Nuevo Laredo sits directly on the U.S. border in Tamaulipas and is the single most important portal for smuggling cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine into the United States. Losing it would be catastrophic. The Zetas are sent to defend it. The result is a massacre. The Sinaloa gunmen are outclassed in every conceivable way. In 2005 and 2006, Los Zetas repel every incursion because the last several chiefs had been murdered or fled. He was a good man, a brave man, a father of three. He stood before cameras that morning and declared, "I am not beholden to anyone. My commitment is to the citizenry." Within 6 hours, he was dead. Zeta hitmen pumped more than 30 bullets into his body in broad daylight. His death sent a message to every law enforcement official, politician, and judge in northeastern Mexico. The Zetas own these streets. You work for them or you die. They didn't just recruit from the Mexican military either. As their numbers grew and the original GAFE operators were gradually killed or captured, the Zetas began hiring Guatemalan Cartels, the most feared special forces unit in Central America. Trained in brutal counterinsurgency warfare during Guatemala's civil war. They brought in corrupt federal, state, and local police, former U.S. Army soldiers, anyone who knew how to fight and kill professionally. By the time Z1, Arturo Guzman de Sena, was killed by Mexican Army Special Forces in a restaurant in Matamoros on November 21, 2002, Los Zetas had already transformed from a small bodyguard unit into a full military force. The man who built them was dead. The machine he built was just getting started. Guzman de Sena was the architect, one analyst described. But Lazcano, Z3, was the one who would turn the Zetas into something no one had ever seen before.
This is my reign! Let's go!
Heriberto Lazcano, Z3, also known as El Lasca, also known as El Verdugo the Executioner. The man who turned a band of military deserters into the most feared criminal organization on the planet. Lazcano takes command of Los Zetas after Guzman de Sena's death in 2002. And almost immediately after, the Gulf Cartel's leader Ocil Cardenas Gillen is arrested in March 2003. It is a crisis that would have destroyed any other criminal organization. Instead, for Los Zetas, it is an opportunity. Lazcano also builds what can only be described as a shadow state. The Zetas infiltrate state governments in Tamaulipas and Veracruz. They control police departments. They fund political campaigns. They run entire towns. In some areas of Tamaulipas, Los Zetas do not simply coexist with local government. They are the local government. Mayors receive their salaries from the cartel. Police chiefs report to Zeta commanders. Business owners pay weekly extortion fees or watch their businesses burn. Under Lazcano, the Zetas also pioneer the use of terror as a business strategy. not just killing rivals or performing violence as spectacle. Decapitations, bodies dissolved in acid, human beings burned alive, torture videos distributed to rivals and law enforcement as a warning. The cartel doesn't just want to win territorial disputes. It wants its enemies, and everyone watching, to be so paralyzed by fear that resistance becomes unthinkable. By 2010, early analysts indicate that Los Zetas are the largest organized crime group in Mexico in terms of geographical presence, controlling hundreds of municipalities across 11 states. They have spread into Guatemala, seizing trafficking corridors with military force. They have contacts in Panama, Honduras, El Salvador, Peru, Venezuela, the United States, and Europe. They are just known for being a different kind of human being, one Mexico-based researcher told Al Jazeera. The Zetas definitely have the reputation of being the most dangerous, the most vicious, the most renegade of the cartels. And then comes February 2010, the moment that changes everything. The moment the Zetas cut their last remaining tie to the Gulf Cartel and declare themselves independent. From this moment forward, they answer to no one. It is the most dangerous thing they have ever done, and it unleashes a level of violence that shocks even Mexico. August 24, 2010. A convoy of Zeta gunmen stops a group of migrants in the municipality of San Fernando, Tamaulipas, 72 people. Men and women from Honduras, El Salvador, Ecuador, Brazil, and other countries. They have crossed multiple borders, traveled thousands of miles, and are trying to reach the United States, trying to reach a better life. The Zetas stop them. They offer a choice: join the cartel as soldiers, mules, or informants, or pay a ransom. The migrants have no money. Many refuse to join a criminal organization. So the Zetas take them to a ranch outside the village of Alhuizacal, and they execute them. One by one, shot in the back of the head, 58 men, 14 women. 72 people in total piled up in a warehouse like they were nothing. One man survives, an Ecuadorian. He takes a bullet in the neck and face and plays dead. He lies in the pile of corpses for hours. Then, when the killers are gone, he gets up. He walks shot, bleeding in the baking Tamaulipas sun for more than 10 miles through the desert until he reaches a military checkpoint. He tells them what happened. The Mexican military goes to the ranch. What they find shocks the entire world. A captured Zeta later tells investigators the migrants were killed because the Zetas believed they would be recruited by their rival, the Gulf Cartel. 72 human beings. Killed not because of anything they had done, but because of something the Zetas thought they might do. The massacre was reported as the biggest single discovery of its kind in the Mexican drug war, and as the worst known atrocity committed by a Mexican trafficking organization to date. The UN, Amnesty International, and governments across Latin America demanded justice. Justice did not come quickly, and Los Zetas did not slow down. March 2011, the same municipality of San Fernando. Los Zetas begin stopping passenger buses on Federal Highway 101, a road locals would come to call the Highway of Death. They pull the buses over at fake military checkpoints. They kidnap the passengers, or ordinary Mexican citizens going about their lives. They take them to ranches. What happens next is almost incomprehensible. Male passengers are forced to fight each other to the death. Cage fights between kidnapped civilians, as a test, and as a training exercise for new Zeta recruits. One Zeta member later testifies in a U.S. court that the fights were ordered by the Zeta commander Miguel Trevino Morales to make new killers lose their fear. Women are raped. Those who survive the fights and prove themselves are forced to join the cartel. Everyone else is killed. Between April 6 and June 7, 2011, Mexican authorities excavate the surrounding area and find 193 bodies buried in 47 clandestine mass graves. 193 people, murdered, buried, and forgotten. Some estimates from arrested Zetas suggest more than 600 total bodies may be buried in clandestine graves near San Fernando, though Mexican authorities never confirmed the full number. In a single stretch of highway in northeastern Mexico, Los Zetas had created a killing field that the Mexican government could no longer ignore or contain. The highway of death had become Mexico's darkest secret, and now the entire world was looking at it. October 7, 2012. An anonymous tip. Mexican Navy intelligence receives information about the location of a man they have been hunting for a decade, the co-founder of Los Zetas. The man who turned a band of military deserters into a continent-spanning empire of terror, Heriberto Lazcano, El Lasca. Z3. Mexican Marines move into a remote area of Coahuila State close to the Texas border. They find Lazcano. A firefight breaks out. When it is over, Lazcano is dead. He is 37 years old. The Mexican Navy confirms the kill through forensic examination. The first commander of Los Zetas, the man who oversaw the San Fernando massacres, the Casino Real attack, the systematic torture and murder of thousands, is gone. But the story does not end there. In one final act that captures everything about the chaos of Mexico's drug war, the body of Heriberto Lazcano is stolen from the morgue by armed men within hours of his death being confirmed. Gunmen walk into a funeral home in Coahuila and take the corpse. Los Zetas will not allow even their dead leader to be paraded by the government. Even in death they had power, one Mexican journalist reported. Even the body of their leader was untouchable. With Lazcano dead, formal command passes to Z40 Miguel Trevino Morales. The man who was already running the day-to-day operations now has no one above him, no one to restrain him, no one to tell him when enough is enough. July 15, 2013, 3 a.m. Mexican Marines close in on a vehicle traveling near Anahuac, Nuevo Leon, close to the Texas border. Inside, Miguel Angel Trevino Morales, Z40, the man who ordered the San Fernando massacres. The man who burned the Casino Real, the man described as one of the most sadistic criminals in modern history. He is arrested without a single shot fired. The arrest stuns Mexico. Not because Z40 is captured. The government had been hunting him for years, but because of how it happens. The most brutal man in the most brutal cartel in Mexico surrenders without a fight. No last stand, no blaze of glory, just a man in a truck who knows the game is finally over. Power passes to his brother, Omar Trevino Morales, Z42, but Omar is not Z40. He does not have the same commanding presence, the same terrifying reputation. The Zetas under Z42 continue operating, but the golden era, if you can call the era of mass murder and burning casinos golden, is over. 2 years later, in March 2015, Mexican federal forces capture Omar Trevino Morales at one of his homes in San Pedro Garza Garcia, one of the wealthiest municipalities in Mexico. The last Trevino brother in command is in custody. In 2019, a Mexican court sentences him to 18 years in prison. In August 2024, 11 Zeta gunmen convicted for their direct role in the 2010 San Fernando massacre receive sentences of up to 50 years in a Mexican court. Justice, 14 years late, finally reaches a fraction of the men who murdered 72 people on that ranch. Rival groups struggling to dislodge the Zetas adopted some of their tactics, one analysis states, and felt the need to arm themselves with the same military-style weaponry in order to compete, further ramping up violence across the country. CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, which we covered in our last documentary, explicitly modeled itself on the Zeta approach: military weapons, military tactics, confrontational violence against the state itself. The Zetas did not just terrorize Mexico. They taught every cartel that came after them how to be worse. The U.S. government considers the Zeta legacy responsible for deepening the arms race between Mexican cartels and the state, fueling the demand for military-grade weapons that flowed south from the United States, triggering political crises over corruption that paralyzed entire states, and contributing directly to the wave of migration that saw hundreds of thousands of Central Americans and Mexicans flee northward from the violence the Zetas had normalized. Here is what the story of Los Zetas actually is. It is not just a story about drugs. It is a story about what happens when a state fails its own people. When soldiers are paid so little that they can be bought for a cartel salary. When poverty is so deep that crime is the only rational choice. When corruption is so total that an entire criminal army can operate for decades with political protection. It is a story about the consequences of military training without accountability. America spent years and taxpayer money training elite Mexican forces to be perfect weapons, and then watched as those weapons turned around and pointed at civilians. It is a story about 72 people who just wanted to reach a better life and were shot in the back of the head in a warehouse in the desert. About 193 people pulled off buses and murdered in mass graves. About 52 people burned alive in a casino because the owner owed money. About a police chief who accepted the most dangerous job in Mexico and was dead within 6 hours. Los Zetas as an organization is broken. Its leaders are dead or in prison. Its territory is fragmented, but the violence they made normal has never gone away. The fear they planted in entire states of Mexico has never left. The children who grew up watching cartel executions on the streets of Nuevo Laredo and Tamaulipas are adults now. Some of them are the soldiers fighting the cartels. Some of them joined the cartels. And the cycle continues. America trained them, Mexico unleashed them, and thousands of ordinary, innocent people paid the price. That is the story of Los Zetas. Soldiers who were built to stop the cartels, and became the worst cartel Mexico ever faced. A story of betrayal, ambition, and a level of violence that changed an entire country forever. If this documentary hit you the way it hit me when I researched it, please smash that like button. Subscribe to Crime Case Vault, and share this with someone who thinks Mexico is just beaches and tacos. This is the real Mexico, the one the news does not fully explain, the one that matters. And here is the question I want you to answer in the comments below. The U.S. trained these soldiers. Does that make America partially responsible for what Los Zetas became? Drop your answer down there. I will read every single one. New documentary dropping soon. Stay locked in. Stay curious. And remember, the most disturbing stories are always the true ones.